Hey everyone, and welcome back to Whispering Reapers. You know, Los Santos, it's a city of dreams for some, a playground of chaos for most of us who jump into GTA 5. We expect fast cars, daring heists, and maybe a little bit of friendly rivalry online. But what happens when the lines blur? When the game stops feeling like a game and starts feeling wrong? Tonight we're diving deep into the digital shadows of a world we thought we knew. We've got 5 stories for you, accounts from players who swear these things happened, experiences that turned their virtual escape into something genuinely unsettling. These aren't your typical creepypastas. These are tales from the trenches, encounters that left players questioning what's code, what's a glitch, and what might be something else entirely. So dim the lights, put on your headphones, and get ready. These are 5 disturbing, supposedly true GTA 5 horror stories. The Watcher of Mirror Park. Our first story comes from a player named Mikey_D, a pretty casual GTA Online player. He wasn't into griefing or heavy PvP. Mostly he just liked cruising around, customizing cars and doing the occasional mission with friends. Mirror Park was his favorite spot. He loved the suburban vibe, the lake, the way it felt like a little slice of calm amidst the usual Los Santos madness. It was his digital Zen garden. It started subtly. Mikey was in a relatively empty lobby. Maybe 5 or 6 other players scattered across the map, none of them near him. He was test driving a newly modded sedan, doing laps around the Mirror Park residential area. He noticed another player icon on the minimap, also in Mirror Park. Nothing unusual there. But this player, whose gamertag was something generic like player 123 with a string of numbers, seemed to be mirroring his route. Mikey would turn left. A few seconds later, the blip would turn left. He'd speed up, the blip would speed up. At first, he shrugged it off. Coincidence, maybe the other guy was just doing the same thing, enjoying the quiet streets. But it continued for a good 10 minutes. Mikey decided to test it. He pulled into a driveway and stopped. The other player's blip continued for a moment, then slowed and stopped a couple of streets away, still within the Mirror Park area, but not directly visible. Mikey waited. Nothing. He backed out and drove off. The blip started moving again, following. Now Mikey was getting a little weirded out. This wasn't aggressive. The player wasn't trying to ram him or shoot him. They were just there. He drove towards the Mirror Park lake, parked, and got out of his car. He looked around, no sign of the other player. He checked the minimap. The blip was closer now, near the edge of the park area. Mikey walked towards one of the benches overlooking the water. He sat his character down. A few moments later, a figure walked into his field of vision. It was the other player. Their character was dressed in plain, dark clothing, jeans, a hoodie, nothing outlandish. They walked slowly, deliberately, towards another bench a little distance away from Mikey and sat down. Just sat there, facing the same direction as Mikey, towards the lake. "Hey, nice evening, huh?" No response. He waited a bit. "You following me, buddy?" Still nothing. The player character just sat there, perfectly still. Mikey started to feel a prickle of unease. This was beyond typical GTA Online behavior. There was no taunting, no attempt at interaction beyond this silent, persistent presence. He stood up and started walking along the lake path. After a few seconds, he heard the faint sound of footsteps behind him. He didn't even need to check the minimap. He picked up his pace, breaking into a jog. The footsteps behind him quickened too. He ran. So did they. This went on for a minute, a silent chase around the lake. Mikey was starting to panic a little. It felt like something out of a slasher movie, but without the immediate threat of violence, which somehow made it worse. It was the anticipation, the unknown intent. He decided to try and lose them. He sprinted towards his car, jumped in, and sped off, leaving Mirror Park behind, heading towards the city center. He glanced at the minimap. The blip was still in Mirror Park, stationary for a moment, then it started moving, slowly at first, then picking up speed, heading in his general direction. They weren't in a car, or if they were, it wasn't a fast one. He was gaining distance. He drove around downtown for a while, trying to shake the weird feeling. He joined a quick job, did a race, trying to forget about it. When he returned to free mode, he checked the player list. Player 123 was gone from the lobby. Mikey breathed a sigh of relief. Just some weirdo, he thought. As he got closer, he noticed something else. The character model seemed a little off. The way the lighting hit it wasn't quite right. It was almost too dark, absorbing the ambient light rather than reflecting it. He got within a few feet and stopped. "Hello," he said, his voice trembling slightly as he spoke into his mic, even though he knew it was pointless if this wasn't a player. The figure slowly turned its head, just its head. The body remained rigid, facing the lake. The character model's face was obscured by the hoodie's shadow. But Mikey swore he could feel an intense gaze. There was no animation for this kind of slow, isolated head turn for player models or NPCs. It was unnatural. Then the figure raised a hand and pointed. Not at Mikey, but at the house directly across the street from the pier, one of the purchasable Mirror Park homes. Mikey didn't own that one. He backed away slowly. The figure remained, head turned, hand pointing. Mikey got into his car, his heart pounding. He didn't speed away this time. He reversed slowly, eyes fixed on the figure on the pier. It didn't move, it just watched him go. Mikey never went back to Mirror Park alone after that. He said that sometimes, when he was in other parts of the map, he'd see a player blip on the edge of his radar, just sitting there, and he'd get a cold feeling, wondering if it was player 123 or whatever that thing on the pier was. He even claimed that once he received a message on the in-game phone from an unknown number. It just said, "I see you." He tried to find explanations, a bizarre, persistent glitch, a hacker with a very specific, creepy MO. Or was it just his imagination fueled by that first unsettling encounter? He never found out. But the image of that silent figure on the pier, turning its head with that impossible smoothness, pointing at that empty house, that stayed with him. He said it made him feel like he wasn't just playing a game anymore, but that something in the game was playing with him. Our next story takes us to the majestic and mysterious Mount Chiliad. This account comes from a player named Sarah who went by Chiliad Seeker online. She was obsessed with the Mount Chiliad mystery, the mural, the UFOs, the jetpack. She'd spent countless hours exploring every nook and cranny of the mountain, both in story mode and online. One evening, Sarah was in a solo online session, specifically to avoid distractions. She wanted to explore a remote, almost inaccessible cave system she'd read about on a forum, rumored to be near the base of Chiliad on the western side. It wasn't marked on any maps, and the directions were vague. She'd landed her Frogger helicopter precariously on a narrow ledge and was now on foot, scrambling over rocks, the in-game wind howling around her. The atmosphere was already pretty eerie. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, but the deep valleys around Chiliad were sinking into shadow. The only sounds were the wind, the occasional cry of a hawk, and her character's footsteps on the loose gravel. After about 20 minutes of careful searching, she found it, a dark fissure in the rock face, partially hidden by overgrown bushes. It was barely wide enough for her character to squeeze through. Equipping her flashlight, she pushed into the narrow opening. The passage quickly opened up into a small, damp cave. The beam of her flashlight danced off wet rock walls. It was quiet in here, the wind outside now a muffled roar. She explored this first chamber. Nothing much, just rocks and a bit of debris. But she noticed another, even smaller passage leading deeper into the mountain. This was where things started to get strange. As she moved towards the second passage, she thought she heard something. A whisper. It was incredibly faint, almost like the sound of wind whistling through a tiny crack. But it had a sibilant quality, like an S sound being drawn out. She stopped, listening intently. Silence. Maybe it was just the game's ambient sound design trying to be spooky. She pressed on, entering the narrower passage. This one was more of a crawl space. Her character had to crouch low. The flashlight beam was constricted, showing only a few feet ahead. Then she heard it again. Stay. This time it was clearer. It wasn't English, not exactly. It sounded like a word, but distorted, stretched, and definitely not part of the game's normal audio. Sarah felt a genuine chill. She was alone in her room, but she suddenly felt like someone was standing right behind her. She paused her game, took off her headset, listened. Her apartment was silent. Heart thumping a bit, she put the headset back on and unpaused. She moved forward a few more feet. Leave us. The whisper was closer now, seemingly coming from all around her in the oppressive darkness of the cave. It wasn't just an ambient sound. It had a directional quality, but it was everywhere and nowhere at once. Her character's breath hitched in the game, a subtle animation she'd never noticed before under such duress. Or maybe she was imagining that part. Sarah was a seasoned gamer, not easily spooked. But this was different. There were no enemies here, no jump scares. Just these disembodied, sibilant whispers in a place no one was supposed to be. She considered turning back, but her curiosity, the part of her that was the Chiliad seeker, pushed her forward. What was causing this? A rare audio glitch? Something deliberately programmed by Rockstar to mess with explorers? The passage opened into a slightly larger cavern, but this one was different. The rock walls seemed to shimmer faintly, even outside the direct beam of her flashlight. And in the center of the cavern was a crude arrangement of stones, almost like a small primitive altar. There was nothing on it, just the stones. As she approached the stone arrangement, the whispering intensified. It wasn't just one voice anymore. It sounded like multiple voices, all whispering at once, overlapping, a cacophony of sibilant sounds that she couldn't decipher. But the intent felt hostile, protective. Get out, seeker. Her blood turned to ice. Seeker. It used her online persona, or at least a word that was too close to be a coincidence. How? This was a solo session. There was no way the game or anything in it should know her gamer tag or her self-proclaimed title. Her hands were trembling on the controller. She backed away from the stone altar. The whispering seemed to follow her, growing louder, more agitated as she retreated. She turned and scrambled back into the narrow passage, the cacophony of hisses and distorted words echoing behind her. You will not find... We are eternal. The mountain watches. The phrases were broken, nightmarish. She didn't stop until she was back in the first, larger cave. The whispering was fainter here, but still present, like an echo in her mind. She practically threw her character through the fissure leading outside, bursting back onto the mountainside just as full darkness enveloped Los Santos. She scrambled back to her helicopter, the sound of the rotors a welcome relief from the oppressive silence and the insidious whispers of the cave. She took off, gaining altitude, not looking back. She flew straight to her apartment in the city and logged off. Sarah said she didn't play GTA 5 for a week after that. When she did return, she avoided Mount Chiliad altogether for a long time. She tried to research the cave, the whispers. She found a few obscure forum posts mentioning strange sounds in remote parts of the mountain, but nothing as specific or as personal as what she experienced. No one mentioned the game seemingly knowing their name. She wonders if it was a uniquely generated glitch, a perfect storm of audio bugs and environmental triggers. Or maybe, just maybe, Rockstar put something truly deep and hidden in that mountain. Something that reacts to those who seek too persistently. She never went back to that specific cave. The thought of those whispers, and especially that one-word seeker, was enough to keep her away for good. The mountain, she felt, was indeed watching, and it didn't like to be disturbed. This next story comes from a player named Devnal, a software developer in real life who enjoys picking apart game mechanics and looking for exploits or interesting bugs. He wasn't easily scared by in-game events, preferring to analyze them. But one late-night session exploring the exterior of the Humane Labs and Research Facility left him deeply unsettled. Devnal was in an invite-only session, methodically testing the boundaries and collision detection around the less trafficked northern perimeter of Humane Labs. He was trying to find a way to glitch inside without triggering a mission, just for the sake of exploration. It was around 3 a.m. in-game, dark, and a thick fog had rolled in from the sea, making visibility poor. The only sounds were the lapping of waves against the nearby shore and the distant hum of the facility. He was using the atomizer gun to try and propel himself over certain fences when he noticed something odd. One of the security cameras mounted on a wall near a loading bay seemed to be tracking him even though he was outside the restricted area and hadn't triggered any alert. This was unusual. Normally those cameras were static props unless a mission script activated them. He moved left, the camera swiveled left. He moved right, it swiveled right, smoothly, perfectly. Okay, that's interesting, he thought. Maybe a new stealth mechanic I haven't seen or a persistent state from a previous activity. He decided to get a closer look. He maneuvered his character to a spot directly beneath the camera, out of its line of sight, then tried to climb onto some nearby crates to get level with it. As he did, his game stuttered. A massive lag spike hit him, freezing his screen for a good 2 or 3 seconds. When it recovered, his character was standing a few feet away from where he'd been, and the camera was now pointing directly down at the spot he had been standing. That was weird. Lag spikes happened, but the camera's immediate reorientation was too precise. He then noticed a faint, rhythmic red light pulsing from the lens of the camera, something he hadn't seen before on these models. It was less like a recording light and more like a heartbeat. He ignored it for a moment and continued his attempts to find a breach point further down the wall. About 50 yards along, he found a section where the texture mapping looked corrupted. A patch of wall about 10 feet square was shimmering, not with a normal lighting effect, but like digital noise. A chaotic mess of pixels cycling rapidly through different colors and patterns. It looked like a massive graphical artifact. As a developer, Devnal was intrigued. He approached it cautiously. As he got closer, he started to hear a low electronic hum, not the normal ambient sound of the facility, but a distinct, almost painful buzzing, like a failing transformer coming directly from the corrupted patch of wall. He made his character touch the shimmering surface. The moment he did, his game went haywire. The screen didn't freeze this time. Instead, it violently glitched. The geometry of the world twisted and distorted, colors flashed erratically. His character model began to spasm, limbs stretching and contorting at impossible angles like something out of a Cronenberg film. The buzzing sound intensified, becoming a deafening roar in his headset mixed with what sounded like distorted, bit-crushed screams. Devnal, despite his analytical nature, felt a surge of panic. This wasn't a normal bug, this felt aggressive. He tried to move his character away, but the controls were unresponsive. He was stuck, watching his avatar get mangled by this digital anomaly. He could hear his PC's fans kicking into overdrive. He mashed the S key, trying to bring up the pause menu, but nothing happened. The visual and auditory assault continued. Then, through the chaos on screen, he saw text appearing. Not in a dialogue box, not in the chat window, but burned directly into the corrupted visuals like old-school screen burn-in, but forming and reforming rapidly. System error, corruption detected, entity unleashed, containment failure 777. The numbers 777 flashed repeatedly. His character model was now just a grotesque, elongated mess of polygons still twitching. The screaming sound was unbearable. He reached for his PC's power button, ready to do a hard reset. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The screen snapped back to normal. He was standing a few feet from the wall, which now looked perfectly ordinary. No shimmering, no corrupted textures. The buzzing was gone. The in-game night was calm again, the fog still thick. His character was fine. He checked his PC's performance monitors. Everything normal. He was breathing heavily. What the hell was that? He looked at the wall again, then back at the security camera he'd seen earlier. It was static, pointing straight ahead, the rhythmic red light gone. He cautiously approached the section of wall where the anomaly had been. Nothing. It was just a plain concrete wall. He tried to make his character touch it. Nothing happened. It was like it had never been there. But the messages he saw: entity unleashed, containment failure _777. That wasn't typical error messaging for a game. It sounded like something from an in-universe sci-fi horror. Devnal spent the rest of the night trying to replicate the event. He couldn't. He went back to the same spot, at the same in-game time, in similar foggy weather. Nothing. The wall remained normal. The camera remained static. He scoured game files, looked for any mention of containment failure _777 or similar error codes. He found nothing. He posted anonymously on a few obscure glitch hunting forums, describing the visual and auditory effects, the text. Most responses dismissed it as a severe one-off graphical driver crash, combined with an overactive imagination or perhaps a modder in the session, even though he was sure it was invite only and he was alone. But Devnal remains convinced it was something more. The precision of the camera, the specific location of the corrupted wall, the unique and terrifying nature of the glitch, and especially those messages. He theorized it might have been a fragment of some cut content, a horror-themed mission or event related to humane labs that was never fully removed. Its trigger conditions so obscure and specific that he stumbled upon them by pure chance. Or perhaps he mused, it was the game itself, its complex systems momentarily breaking down in a way that manifested as something sentient and hostile. He still plays GTA 5, still pokes at its boundaries, but he's a lot more cautious around humane labs, especially on foggy nights. And sometimes, when his game stutters or a weird graphical glitch appears, he feels a flicker of that same dread, wondering if the entity is trying to break through again. The Drowning Man of Vespucci Beach. Our fourth story is a chilling account from a player named Jenna92 who mostly enjoyed the more relaxed side of GTA Online car meets, flying, and just exploring the coastline. This particular incident happened during a late-night session while she was taking a leisurely flight in a Dodo seaplane along the coast near Vespucci Beach. It was a clear in-game night, the city lights twinkling. Jenna was flying low over the water, enjoying the view. She wasn't in a crowded lobby. Maybe 10 other players were online, most of them engaged in activities far inland. She was alone out here over the dark ocean. As she passed the Vespucci Beach pier, she noticed something in the water just beyond the breaking waves. At first, she thought it was debris or maybe one of the game's sharks, though they rarely came this close to shore. She circled around for a better look, descending slightly. It was a person, or at least the character model of a person. They were floating face down in the water, limbs spread-eagled, completely motionless. An NPC, she assumed, one that had somehow glitched and drowned. It happened sometimes. The AI wasn't perfect. Still, there was something unsettling about the stillness of the figure, the way it bobbed lifelessly with the gentle swell of the waves under the moonlight. She landed her Dodo on the water a little way off and swam closer to investigate. As she approached, she could see it was a male NPC model, dressed in casual beachwear shorts and a t-shirt. Nothing out of the ordinary. She got right up to it. Poor guy, she thought, a little morbidly amused by the game's occasional grim realism. She nudged the model with her character. It remained limp, unresponsive, definitely just a dead NPC. She was about to swim back to her plane when she heard it. A sound. A very faint gurgling gasp. Jenna froze. She was wearing a good headset and the sound was distinct, close. It definitely came from the direction of the dead NPC. She looked at the model, still face down, still motionless. Had she imagined it? The game had ambient sounds, but nothing like that for a supposedly dead character. She waited, listening. Silence, just the lapping of the waves. She was about to dismiss it when it happened again. A wet, choked gasp, followed by a low moan. It sounded like someone desperately trying to draw breath but failing, water filling their lungs. Jenna's heart started to thump. This was creepy. She looked around. No other players nearby, no subs, no boats, just her dodo floating a short distance away. The sounds were absolutely coming from the NPC model in front of her. She tried to interact with it again, pushing it. The model flopped realistically but remained face down. The gurgling sounds continued, intermittent but undeniably there. It was as if the game had spawned a character in a drowning state but skipped the dead state, leaving it in some horrible limbo. Then, the NPC model's head twitched. Just a small, jerky movement, then one of its arms. It was still face down, but it was moving. Not like it was trying to swim, but more like involuntary muscle spasms. The gurgling became more frantic, louder. Jenna backed away in the water, a genuine sense of dread washing over her. This wasn't just a glitch, this was deeply unsettling. The game was simulating a drowning in excruciating detail, but on a character that should have been just a ragdoll. She kept watching, horrified. The model's limbs began to flail weakly. It tried to lift its head, but it flopped back down into the water with a splash. The gurgling sounds were now mixed with what sounded like muffled, desperate cries. Jenna felt a strange mix of pity and terror. It was just pixels, she told herself, just code. But the sounds, the struggling animations that seemed too real, too specific for a random glitch, were getting to her. It felt like she was witnessing something she wasn't supposed to see, a hidden dark routine in the game's engine. Suddenly the NPC model violently arched its back, its head coming clear of the water for a brief second. Jenna didn't see a face, just the back of the head, but in that instant the gurgling stopped and was replaced by a single clear, drawn-out word that chilled her to the bone. Help! It was a standard male NPC voice, but filled with such an agonizing, desperate inflection that it sounded utterly real. Then just as quickly the model went limp again, falling face down. The struggling stopped. The gurgling stopped. There was only silence and the gentle lapping of the waves. Jenna stared at the now truly motionless form. She waited for a long time. Nothing. It was just a dead NPC again. But she knew what she'd heard, what she'd seen. That desperate plea. She swam back to her dodo as fast as she could, not looking back at the figure in the water. She took off and flew high, away from the coast, away from Vespucci Beach. She didn't save any footage. She was too shaken at the moment to think about it. The Children of the Alamo Sea. Our final story tonight is perhaps one of the most debated and unsettling, partly because it involves an element that GTA 5 famously, and for good reason, does not include: children. This account comes from a group of 3 friends, Marco Polo, Reaper_1, and Stacy Q, who were exploring the Alamo Sea area late one night in an online session. They weren't looking for trouble. They were actually on a bit of a photographic expedition, trying to get cool, atmospheric shots of sandy shores and the surrounding desert landscape at night. The Alamo Sea, with its murky waters and isolated fields, seemed like a good spot. They were in a dinghy, slowly making their way across the northern part of the sea, near where Cassidy Creek flows into it. The in-game time was around 2 a.m., and a light mist was hanging over the water, reducing visibility and making everything look eerie. Marco Polo was steering the dinghy. Reaper_1 was in the front with a sniper rifle. Not for shooting, but for its scope to see distant details, and Stacy Q was in the passenger seat, fiddling with the Snapmatic camera. It was Reaper_1 who saw them first. Reaper_1. Guys, what the hell is that? He said over voice chat, his voice suddenly tense. He was looking through his scope towards a small, unnamed island in the middle of that section of the Alamo Sea, one of those little spits of land that barely register on the map. Marco Polo asked, slowing the boat. Reaper_1, I don't know. Looks like figures, small figures, on that island. Stacy Q NPCs? Fishermen, maybe? No, they're too small, and they're moving weird. Marco Polo carefully navigated the dinghy closer to the island. As they approached, The mist seemed to thicken around the small landmass almost unnaturally. They could now see them without the scope. 3 small, shadowy figures were standing near the water's edge on the island. They were roughly child-sized, far smaller than any adult NPC model in the game. Their silhouettes were indistinct in the gloom and mist, but their proportions were unmistakably juvenile. No way, GTA doesn't have kids. This has to be a glitch, right? Or modders? Can't be modders if they're not here. Marco Polo checked the player list. They were the only 3 in their crew, and the lobby only had a few other scattered players, none of them nearby or known for modding. The 3 figures on the island stood perfectly still, facing the approaching boat. They didn't react like normal NPCs would. No waving, no running, no cowering, just silent small sentinels in the mist. This is freaking me out. Their models look wrong, too dark, almost like they're not being lit properly by the moonlight. Marco Polo brought the dinghy to a stop about 30 feet from the shore of the little island. The 3 players just watched the figures, and the figures presumably watched them. The silence was heavy, broken only by the lapping of water against the boat and the distant hum of the game's ambience. Then one of the small figures raised an arm and pointed towards them. It was a slow, deliberate gesture. Okay, I've had enough of this. Let's get out of here, Marco. What the? But before Marco Polo could react, the figures started to move. They didn't walk or run, they glided. They moved smoothly, silently from the shoreline directly into the water, without a splash, without any swimming animation. They just slid into the Alamo Sea, their small, dark forms sinking beneath the surface. The 3 friends watched, stunned, as the last of the figures disappeared under the murky water. For a moment, nothing happened. Then they heard it, faint at first, then growing louder. Singing. It was the sound of children singing, a nursery rhyme, but distorted, off-key and echoing strangely across the water as if coming from underwater. The melody was vaguely familiar, like a twisted version of Ring Around the Rosie or London Bridge. The voices were high-pitched, ethereal, and deeply unsettling. "They're under the boat! I'm getting out of here!" Reap One shouted, aiming his rifle down into the water, though he knew it was useless. The water was too dark, too murky. The singing seemed to be coming from all around them, beneath them. The boat began to rock gently, even though the water was calm. Marco Polo yelled, slamming the throttle. The dinghy lurched forward, speeding away from the cursed island. The singing followed them for a short distance, then gradually faded as they reached the southern shore of the Alamo Sea near Sandy Shores. They didn't stop until they hit land, beaching the dinghy hard. They scrambled out, looking back at the dark water. Silence. The mist over the island seemed to have dissipated slightly. They were all shaken. They talked about it for hours, trying to make sense of it. Child models don't exist in GTA 5's code, not in any accessible way. The gliding movement, the underwater singing, none of it made any sense from a game mechanics perspective. They went back to the island in daylight in a new session. It was just a normal, empty spit of land, no figures, no strange sounds. They tried to replicate the conditions. Night, mist, the same boat, the same route, nothing. They posted their story on a few forums. Some people accused them of making it up, of being attention seekers. Others suggested it might have been a very sophisticated and subtle modder who somehow injected those assets into their game remotely, just to mess with them, though that seemed incredibly far-fetched for such a specific and localized event. A few others shared vague stories of ghost children or strange whispers heard in remote, desolate parts of the map, particularly around the Alamo Sea and El Gordo Lighthouse, areas often associated with paranormal myths in the GTA community. Marco Polo, Reaper_1, and Stacy Q never found a satisfactory explanation. They saved some gameplay footage, but they said the figures were so dark and the mist so thick that it was hard to make out clear details, and the audio of the singing was faint and distorted on the recording, though to them in the moment it had been terrifyingly clear. They still play GTA 5 together, but they give the Alamo Sea a wide berth at night. The image of those small dark figures gliding into the water, and the sound of that ghostly underwater children's choir became a permanent, chilling memory. It was a stark reminder that even in a game world they thought they knew inside and out, there could be things that defied explanation, things that felt ancient and wrong, lurking just beneath the surface. And that's a wrap for tonight's dive into the unsettling side of Los Santos. 5 stories, 5 players whose virtual fun took a turn into something they couldn't quite explain, whether it's a glitch in the code, a hidden piece of game design, or just our minds playing tricks on us in the dead of night. These experiences definitely leave a mark. What do you think? Which part of these stories did you find the most terrifying? Let me know down in the comments. I read every single one, and I'm always curious to hear your own creepy encounters in the games you play. If you enjoyed these tales from the digital abyss, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with anyone else who appreciates a good gaming horror story, and of course, subscribe to Whispering Reapers for more content like this. We've got plenty more shadows to explore together. Till next time, stay safe out there, both in the real world and the virtual one. You never know what's lurking.